We're talking travel. Summer is getaway season. People are taking trips both near and far. But you know what they say about the best laid plans. So we want to know, how has travel worked out for you this summer? What's your opinion of how travel is feeling these days? Has it been plain sailing, or have you had canceled flights? How are the crowds where you went? And what's been a pleasant surprise? Or maybe you're looking for some suggestions or advice. Travel can be tricky, and so we are delighted to have travel consultant Max Johnson in studio today, a name well known to CBC listeners. So delays, getting compensation, and just plain getting there can be tricky. And Max might have some tips to offer on that. If you have some questions you'd like to ask, we'd also like you to share your stories at 204-780-0893. Max has spent, about the past 50 years traveling around the world, seeking new and exciting experiences for vacationers everywhere, and maybe he'll tell us about some of that. He's with TTJ Tourism, and his special interest is, I would say, product development and niche destinations. Hi, Max.
That sounds good.
That sounds good, doesn't it? Fancy, really. Yeah. I've read up on you over the years. I know these things. It's nice to have you in the studio. I think over the years I've talked to you from the South Seas, from Africa, from Europe, on board ship. It's so calm to have you just in the studio like this.
Well, it makes a pleasant change.
Yes, it does. So we want people to call in and talk to us and talk to Max at 204-770-3085. Oh, no, ignore that number. That's my number. 204-780-0893. Try that. That's a better number to call. So if you want to text us as well, you could do that. 204-588-7355. But don't be shy. Give us a call. So, Max, I'm going to start off with, what is the best trip you've taken recently? I'm going to say recently because you go way back with the trip. So what's the best one you've taken recently?
It's really difficult. When people say, what's the best trip you've been on? There are so many different motivating factors. Mm-hmm. Basically, I've enjoyed them all. So trying to find a best one is different. I was in South America last week and really enjoyed getting to new places. I love the experience of thinking about a destination, and then when you get there, finding out whether you're right or whether you are completely and utterly wrong. Mm-hmm. And last week I ended up in Asuncion in Paraguay for no other reason than the fact that I hadn't been there before. Mm-hmm. And it was just wonderful. Bizarre.
What's it like?
Well, I'd been in Buenos Aires for a few days before. Buenos Aires is one of the most vibrant cities on the face of the planet. Mm-hmm. And flying up to Asuncion, I had an idea that it wouldn't be dissimilar, but it was completely different. In the 4 days I was there, for example, I think I saw about 7 other tourists. And it's a place that is functional, it's old, it has a very, very odd history. Mm-hmm. It's had one wave after another of migrants. In Manitoba, of course, we know about the Mennonite connection, which is incredibly strong. There are probably 70 to 100,000 Mennonites who live in various colonies in Paraguay. Mm-hmm. What I hadn't realized is that there had been waves of Australian utopians who'd gone there.
Australian utopians.
Waves of Japanese and Koreans. And over the years, these various groups had gone to Paraguay simply because there was never really an efficient government in Paraguay. And they just said, come on down. It's a large country. It's empty. And if you want to go and live in the desert, good on you. Mm-hmm. So one wave after another, and has led to just a simply rather unusual atmosphere. And so unusual, I'm going to go back, I think, in February on holiday, rent a car and go and explore a bit more.
It sounds fantastic. And we have Cheryl on the line, and I think you've been stoking the flames for people to share their stories. Hi, Cheryl. Oh, are you there, Cheryl? Oh, wait, I think I have to press the button myself. Good heavens. Hello, Cheryl. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, I pressed the button, yay.
This is Cheryl.
Yeah, so have you been traveling?
Well, I'm not much of a traveler. I did decide to go on a winter holiday, visit some friends in Texas.
Sorry?
It was supposed to be...
In Texas, did you say? Were you sort of cutting in and out?
Yes, I'm sorry. It's
my
phone.
Uh-oh.
Arrived Monday afternoon, and I got there Thursday.
Oh, what happened?
Well, the first morning, they oversold my flight. So I didn't have any definite plans, so I gave up my seat. The next morning, the flight was canceled. Spent another night in the airport. The next morning, the flight was delayed long enough that I missed my connection in Minneapolis.
Oh,
So
no.
spent the night in Minneapolis airport and, finally got to Texas Thursday afternoon.
Oh, dear. So will you get any compensation or anything, do you suppose, or how does that work?
Yes, I was very, very well compensated. They paid for my food, meals, both days, hotel rooms. So I have nothing to complain about as far as how I was treated. But for somebody that's not a great travel fan, it was an interesting trip.
And it took you 3 days longer to get there. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Bit of a drawback. Yes.
Yep.
Well, very interesting to hear that, Cheryl. I'm glad that you did get some compensation, and maybe that'll inspire some of our listeners to compare some stories or burn with outrage if nothing, the same thing didn't happen to them. Thanks very much for calling us. Appreciate
You're welcome. Yeah.
That was Cheryl with a story that she told with great aplomb, considering it took her 3 days to get to her destination. So, Max, are you hearing a lot of stories like that, or have you had something like that happen in terms of like just flat out cancellations, or how's that looking these days? More of that?
I think there's a lot more about it, a lot more of it going on. I think we hear more about it because of social media, because it's considerably easier to get your story out. And there are so many different issues, and it's an incredibly complex problem. But at the root of it, I think, is at the root of our problems, the customers' problems, is the fact that in Canada, any consumer protection that we have, which compared to Europe is not much in anything, tends to be provincial, with the sole exception of transportation, which is a federal issue. So because there is no federal consumer lobbying body in the same way that we have them provincially, yet the airlines maintain a dozen full-time lobbyists in Parliament, the cards are stacked against us.
Yeah.
So we have a situation that our representatives, who are federal MPs, appoint a Canadian Transportation Agency. The CTA have established a series of rules called the Airline Passenger Protection Regulations. These detail absolutely exactly the type of compensation that people should get in the event of various problems. The airlines, unfortunately, are extremely economical with the truth when it comes to the reasons for delays. They, in many ways, force problems on themselves. For example, if you book a flight from Winnipeg to New York or Winnipeg to London, and you have to connect in Toronto, airlines force you into what are called married segments, which means you can't choose which Winnipeg-Toronto flight you book before the flight to London. Airlines know that passengers book the fastest route. So they book improbable connections, and they force you into, for example, a 1 hour and 10-minute connection from a domestic to an international flight. And you're really set up to fail in an airport like Toronto, where delays of 20 minutes are very common. So is that their fault that you miss? They say, well, it was weather. And you say, well, I would have booked a 3-hour connection if I could have done, but you don't allow me to do it. So the airlines really are their own worst enemies in these. But the problem is when it comes to a fight, and it's one of us versus Air Canada or WestJet, you know who's going to win at the beginning.
I suppose. And if you've had an experience like that, or maybe the opposite, let us pray, but it seems unlikely, give us a call at 204-780-0893, or you can text us at 204-588-7355. It's interesting. I had one of those. I was connecting internationally to domestic, and I went, I made the connection and so on. And when I got there, they said, oh, no, you can't get on this flight. And I'm like, well, why? Well, because you won't be able to make the connection. I said, but I'm here. And they're like, too bad. And it's
extraordinary.
It was crazy. Well, we've got people giving us a call, and we'd like you to as well. Give us a call, 204-780-0893. We have Glenda on the line, I believe. Oh no, I guess we don't have Glenda on the line after all. It's funny how those things are kind of set up. But I've also had some good experiences too. And when we're talking about the airlines, I also wanted to ask you about, there seems to be this trend of charging, or threatening at least, to either have to charge for absolutely every little thing, charging for carry-on, those kinds of things. Is this a new model that they're adopting, and what are people saying about it?
I don't think it's necessarily a new model. It's a model that really started a couple of decades ago with the Ryanairs of the world and the ultra low cost carriers. What is new is that what they call legacy carriers, the big proper grown up airlines, have decided to pretend they're big and proper and grown up, but charge people as if they are one of the ultra low cost carriers. And they are just looking for absolutely any way to make another dollar or pound or yen.
And what are prices like, would you say, for just travel in general now? Are they becoming exorbitant? Are there deals to be had? How's that working?
It's really hard to say. Again, there are plenty of deals to be had, but planning in advance is the key to it. If you book well ahead, and you can't book too far ahead, because the airlines play a game that is fundamentally probability. And they say, what is the probability of me selling this seat for that flight at this price? And every day it's slightly different. They sold more than they thought they were going to. They've sold less than they thought they were going to. But usually the best deals are to be had about 6 months out.
6 months, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Not a year, because a year they're at the height of their optimism and they're going to sell every seat at the full price.
yeah.
But by 6 months they know. 3 months out, obviously Christmas is different because it's the same date every year.
Yes.
And we all know that. And waiting for a Christmas deal is not good. And similarly, school holidays, they know exactly when schools are going to break up.
Yeah. Now, I asked you a little earlier about the best trip you've taken recently, and we want to hear from you out there as well. What's the best trip or worst trip you've been taking? 204-780-0893. So, Max, I want to ask you, what is the worst trip you've ever taken, would you say? But again, I guess it depends on what you consider the bad part.
I really can't. I can only remember two rather irritating ones. I was in Romania in the 80s when Ceausescu was at his height of power, and it was simply the most dour place that I've ever been in my life. It was uncomfortable. The idea that people were watching you all the time, which they may or may not have been, was really a little bit unpleasant. So that was one. And the second was a trip that coming back from the South Pacific, where I think 3 days in a row the plane went mechanical and stuck in Fiji and then stuck in Auckland and it just seemed like we were never going to get anywhere. But here we are. We got home in the end.
Here we are. We've got people calling in from 204-780-0893. Cameron, what have your travel adventures been?
Well, I haven't had many adventures, but my wife and my daughters have taken advantage of those ultra low-cost fares 3 times this summer. And as long as they can manage their baggage, and my other daughter had gone to Europe and basically backpacked with a carry-on the whole time. So it's given them the opportunity to get out and see things while using those great low fares, as long as you can just manage the baggage requirements.
Well, traveling light, I think that's a skill that people learn the more they travel, and as long as you don't mind wearing the same thing every single day, it's good.
Exactly, and so it's the ultra low cost has been great for them.
Yeah, and nothing got canceled. They made it to their destinations.
No, I had a cancellation or a massive delay where I spent several hours, but they also notified me, like having the notifications on your phone,
right,
and telling you not to show up at the airport.
Yeah,
that worked for me as well.
Well, that's good. Good to hear. Yeah, thanks very much.
It's been a pleasant summer.
Oh, that's great, Cameron. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, okay. Thanks a lot for calling. Let's hear from Linda. Hi, Linda. Hello, Linda. Hi.
Hi there.
So have you been on any great trips?
Yes, and as I told the person
Chloe,
setting up the
yes.
calls,
Yeah.
that the reason I called is primarily because one of my best trips ever is partly in Max Johnson is partly responsible for piquing my interest in the destination.
Oh,
so yes, quite some time ago, he was doing a program on one of his best trips, and he mentioned Georgia and said it was one of the most beautiful places he had ever been, and he was talking about the wine, and I thought, Georgia, that sounds interesting. And so anyway, last fall I did go to Georgia, and spectacular, loved it.
oh.
one of my absolute best trips. So I want to thank him for that.
Well, that's great to hear. Yeah. It is a fantastic country.
Oh, it's lovely. And you know what? I went a white wine drinker, and I came home a Safravi lover. So it was quite wonderful. And thank you for instigating my interest in the location.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Thanks for calling, Linda.
Okay, bye-bye.
And if you have something to share, give us a call at 204-780-0893. Hello, Jerry. We have Jerry on the line. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Very well. How are you?
Good.
How's flights been for you?
Well, I've actually had 4 negative experiences in the last month and a half, including one as early as yesterday morning. So it kind of goes to the topic that you were talking about. I'll start with yesterday. One of our staff, I booked a flight for her, and she was supposed to leave Winnipeg flying back to Calgary. Now, I understand WestJet had some issues with damaged planes due to hail. However, her flight was canceled in the morning at 8 a.m., but there was no rebooking. And we weren't able to get through to anybody at WestJet on the phone. Their lines were tied up. We ended up having to go to the airport, and almost 2 hours at a desk to finally get her booked on another flight and, hotel and meal vouchers. And it ends up she had to stay here in Winnipeg for an extra day and a half just to get home.
Wow.
And that was a short, simple flight to Calgary.
Gee.
My wife and I were traveling to Europe last month, and on our flight out, and this was similar to what you were just discussing, the married flights where you can't book and change the amount of time between the flights. So we're going to leave to head to Europe, and our flight out of Winnipeg was delayed by 30 minutes, and we only had an hour and 10-minute connection in Toronto. So we land in Toronto, and even before we got off the plane thinking we were going to run to the next flight, we got text messages saying that we'd already been bumped.
Yep.
We were bumped a day into the future, and so we did get hotel and food vouchers, but we've now lost the first day of our trip in London, and we're staying in Toronto.
Gee.
On the way home from Europe, the exact same thing happens where we get delayed coming from London back to Montreal.
Yeah.
We land in Montreal, and the gate for our flight home was still open, but our bags weren't on the flight, so they wouldn't let us get on. And so, again, they had to put us up overnight. Then we had to fly Montreal, Toronto home, a day and a half on the end of the flight as well.
Oh, boy. That's terrible. Wow.
Yeah. And I have to share the last one was coming back from Vegas, and we happened to fly Flair Airlines. Now, Flair only has a couple of flights a week, and coming home from Vegas, the flight was canceled, and we're standing at the counter, and all of a sudden they said, okay, well, this was Saturday morning, and they said, okay, we've got you booked on the next flight. Well, that was Wednesday.
Oh,
and
dear.
because it started off as being mechanical, but then there was high winds, apparently, so it turned into a weather incident, so they weren't on the hook for covering any charges. So
Wow.
we had to stay in Vegas for an extra 4 days.
Oh,
Now,
gee.
we were pretty lucky, and I could work remotely,
Yeah.
but there was an entire plane load of people, and some of them ended up being on the next flight, which was Saturday.
Oh, boy. Well, these are dreadful tales. And, we have one more. We have Brenda on the line, and we just want to try and grab her for 1 second. Mac, did you want to call?
Yeah, I was just going
quickly?
to ask Cameron whether you got the compensation for the European trip.
So I did manage to get some compensation through our credit card.
No, but the airlines...
Nothing from the airlines.
Because they certainly owe you at least $1,000 each for going over. And the European regulations tell 600 euros or the equivalent for coming back.
Aha.
Right.
Look into that one, Jerry.
Absolutely, I will.
Thanks very much
Thank
for
you.
calling. All right, bye-bye. And we're just going to try and squeeze in Brenda. Hello, Brenda.
Hi.
Hi. We just got like 30 seconds. Can you boil it down? How's your flying experience been?
I've had Canadian flight for WestJet to San Diego booked. WestJet canceled or postponed our flight, and then ultimately canceled it for we were supposed to leave Saturday morning, and Sunday morning at 3:50 a.m. they sent me an email saying our connecting flight was canceled.
Oh no!
So we had to drive down to the States. We drove down to Fargo, managed to get 4 tickets to San Diego, and my son got to enjoy his birthday at Legoland.
Oh, isn't that great? A story with a happy ending. Thank you very much, Brenda, for being speedy with that, and also for telling us a happy ending story.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Thank you to everyone who gave us a call. And thank you especially to you, Max, for joining us in the studio today.
It's a pleasure.
Well, lots of exciting information and hearing of tales. We'll have to get you back soon. People have a lot to say on this subject. So thanks very much. And I'll just say, travel consultant Max Johnson is with TTJ Tourism.
Thank you for watching the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For the latest breaking news and top stories, download the CBC News app.